most of you by now know that I work at VIP Mortgage. A lot of you may not know why or how I got there. For us as LOs, we have a lot of options. And for me, VIP Mortgage was the perfect fit and the best place, in my opinion, to work. So if you have any questions about VIP Mortgage as an LO, or if you are a consumer and you're looking for a mortgage, you can reach out to me on social media, or you can reach out to anybody else that you may know at VIP Mortgage. And our website is vipmtginc.com. Welcome, everybody, to Real Talk with Ryan Madrid. This is a very special day for myself and my sister, who are over here doing production for me. I like to recognize her always. And my nephew, who always does the post-production work for us, which is awesome. Keep it a family affair around here. And thank you to VIP Mortgage for allowing us to do this here in the office. So we usually do like a whole thing after you leave to kind of set up who you are and everything, but I'm just going to roll with this because I think it's super funny. So my next guest here, I know him as Mike. My sister's over here just like wrecking stuff. Mike or Iles or Bubba. So I'm in this industry here and obviously in the mortgage business, and I keep hearing this dude, Frenchy, because one of my buddies that's over here right now, Austin Bates, is doing business with Richmond American. And previous, your other company before that, had known you as Frenchy. So I keep hearing his name, and then finally, like, I see, he shows me like a picture of you, and I was like, Frenchy? Who the hell is Frenchy? So you had changed your name, which is a cool story, right? But I didn't know about that because we haven't seen each other in a very long time. Yeah. So fun fact, we all went to high school together. My sister and Mike were same age, and I was 3 years younger than them. But always one of the greatest dudes, one of the nicest guys. I just remember there was a few people, you and Mike Bauman were always such good guys to me. And I was a freshman, you were a senior. And I think that your reputation in this business, obviously everybody loves Frenchy. And now when I realized who Frenchy was, I was like, oh yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. So Mike Iles-Cremieux, yes, with Richmond American. He is the president at Richmond American. And so welcome, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. This is the first time that we've actually seen each other since we've been in the business. And even though we were friends, you were super loyal to Austin. And so you're like, sorry, bro. Austin's my guy. I can't. And so it's so awesome now that he's here with us, and then you're here to kind of do it. So we've had some really funny conversations before this thing got rolling. But yeah, dude, just thanks a lot for coming in, and we're happy to finally get this going.
Thank you. I mean, there's so much history here and so many interesting like little side roads to take today, because I know like your family is like one of the families when I was growing up that were one of my favorite families for a lot of reasons. But your sister and I in the same class, and we were both student council kids. So we have a lot of the same favorite teachers, same favorite people, favorite friends. And you were the younger brother. And it's so interesting. I've always, when I think of my son and my daughter, I often think of my daughter as Trisha and my son as you, because there's that similar distance. Yep. They're both in high school. They go to Chaparral High School, but I often think about that distance. And you have similarities. He's a soccer player, and you're a soccer player.
We were both super skinny.
Yeah, super skinny. So there's going to be it'll be a lot of fun today. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. And this podcast is basically developed not to just go all about business, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Yep. But I think a huge part of our conversation is going to be the history and stuff, but your transformation, you've made a life transformation recently, and also your career and kind of where you ended up and how you even got into what you're doing. But just like a lot of the other personal things that I think that we've talked offline about, that is super cool. So why don't we dive in a little bit about how we know each other, from like where from, and kind of like your history with, and kind of led to the name change and all that stuff. So
you got it. Westside kid. I take a lot of pride in that because I consider all the toughness in the state to be on the west side. So I still tell my kids, even though they're in an east side school, if their football team goes west, I go, get ready for the beating.
Right.
So there's some
although
toughness.
Chaparral won state this year.
They did good. I know. I had to stand down.
I know.
That's sad. But It's interesting because I grew up around 55th Avenue, Peoria, and Cactus. So at that time, it was all farm fields. So, I remember Dietz Crane was the home builder out there at the time.
Yep.
And my parents bought a little house over there, and I went to Desert Palms Elementary School. And it was it reminds me a lot of now. It was very high growth, and there was production homes being built everywhere. It's funny that I ended up in that industry. I used to actually play in framed homes when I was with all my, creepy grade school friends. We were in the houses, which we shouldn't have been.
Right.
And a lot of my friends went to Copperwood. You, Trisha, so Larry Shoemake, and there was a lot of those that went to Copperwood. And then Cactus High School was the feeder for those grade schools. And so we all went to Cactus High School, but a few years into Cactus High School, they built Ironwood High School. So it cut a lot of our friend group almost in half, because a lot of those kids then ended up going to Ironwood. And some, like you, that had siblings that were in Cactus, it was probably better for you to go to Cactus. So,
but Ironwood was like half a mile from our house, but and then
but you went to Cactus.
In my junior year, Centennial was built, which was even closer to our house.
Yeah.
So, I feel you on that one.
Super high growth. So obviously, I have like two friend groups. I feel like I've lived two lives. One's like a professional life, and the other one, I know right away, like when the secretary reaches to my office and says, someone's asking for Bubba.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, it's someone from high school. Because that was my nickname growing up. And it's a nursery rhyme with my mom. Hubba Bubba Ding Ding, Bubba, you're my everything.
Okay, there you go.
Super embarrassing. Shouldn't have shared it on the podcast, but that's where it comes from. So, Mike Iles, that's what everybody knew me as, just Iles. And I think a lot of people, even when I was in school, didn't realize that my mom got pregnant when she was young, and the father, the sperm donor, did not stick around and was not in my life. So I didn't have that person in my life, and I think after I was a few years old, my mom had actually moved to London, Ontario, in Canada with a girlfriend, and she had met my now father, who I've only known as my father my entire life, Iles-Cremieux, who is actually a real estate agent for West USA.
Okay.
Such a great guy.
Yeah, an incredible
Well, your
human
mom's
being.
was an amazing person too.
Yeah, and I think I'm more like my mom. I think my mom and I are very similar. Like when you become a parent, isn't it interesting? You can see your kids, and you can see like which lineage they follow. Sometimes you'll see the physical characteristics, but then there's some some characteristics like temperament and other things that they follow. But kind of I remember, I think I was in first grade when I have my earliest memories, but I remember my mom and my dad, Iles-Cremieux, sitting down with me and telling me that he wasn't my dad, my real dad.
How old were you in that?
I believe I was in first grade, because
Okay.
I remember it was before I went to Desert Palms. It's like one of my earliest memories. And I remember being really sad about it, because I thought he was my dad. Right. So when you're a young kid, you don't realize these differences. Like I thought, oh, that's my dad. And I remember my mom telling me, like, well, he's not your real father. And I didn't understand that at the time. I was really young. And I remember thinking to myself, once that meeting ended, I remember feeling like not part of something, like something's happening here that I don't understand. And I think it's something that I've carried with myself. And that's not that, like, you have to understand, like, I have had the most amazing upbringing. Like, I have two parents that are incredible, passionate, loving, caring, intelligent people. I've been so well taken care of. But I remember those early years feeling like, like, what did that mean? Like, I'm not, and anything, I remember a year later, he had told me he'd prefer me to call him Dad instead of Daddy, because, it was probably more masculine or something. I don't know. And I remember feeling like, oh, maybe that's because I'm not really his son, and he doesn't want me to call him that name. And I remember being just sensitive to it. So it's an interesting a way to grow up. And often now I think about it, because my sister, we're 16 years apart, and so my dad is her biological father. She has a few children that aren't her biological kids through her husband. Mm-hmm. And she is living the life of my father. She's loving up kids and that weren't originally hers, and she's their mom. And so you learn that lesson that I've learned, that it's not about the biologicals, right? It's about the love and who cares for you. But it's one of those important ingredients we should probably cover at some point today
Yeah.
about, how you navigate through life. And I feel so much about that navigation is about how you were raised and the environment you were raised in.
Well, I couldn't even go as far as, I mean, you are a very sensitive dude.
Yeah.
But you're uber competitive, an incredible athlete. You great soccer player, played football in college, which I don't even know if a lot of people know that about you, that you were that good of an athlete where you were playing. You went to New Mexico State or?
Yeah, New Mexico.
New Mexico, okay.
Northern New Mexico, Northern New Mexico.
Yeah, to play football. Yeah. And, I mean, but you were like you were a badass athlete, but was just super nice.
It's
and
funny.
super humble.
Yeah. What's crazy is, my friend group was odd. I didn't have athlete friends until way later. Most of my friends were like the smart kid that was in student council or and I had a real soft spot in my heart for the kid that wasn't connected to any group. So I constantly kind of found myself in and out of groups, but almost the person that brought groups together, like Mike Bauman and Ben Carey, who I just loved, became friends with Tony Angelo and Brett Powers because I was kind of the connection between the groups.
Right. The swimmer, the student council guy, kind of artsy dude.
And it's funny.
And the ultimate athlete, Tony Angelo.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I tell my kids all the time, it's so crazy when you look back, you are a product of who you hung out with, right? And I don't believe I would have ever have gotten a football scholarship if I wasn't Tony Angelo's friend.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like football, but I liked Tony.
Yeah.
And if you liked Tony, you had to play football.
Right.
Right? So I remember I went out for swimming and diving my first year. Another bit of information you don't know. No. I was actually an all-city diving champion when I was in grade school. I won the city diving championship in the city of Phoenix. They have all the community pools that they do together. And so I actually went out for swimming and diving my freshman year because that was my sport, that and soccer. Mm-hmm. And Tony teased me enough and prodded me to go out for football. And I made a lane change. I went and did football. And it's interesting because I'm the very first person in my family to attend university and graduate from university. Another small fact that nobody knows. And probably the only reason why that happened was because I was on a football scholarship. And so that opportunity came through a friendship, and through hanging out, you attended, all those practices, and it led to a road, right?
Right. Fun fact too is I actually see John Angelo quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because he's with North & Co.
Yeah.
And him and his wife live up in the similar area that I do, and they do really well. They're a team, a real estate team, and
incredible
they kill it.
Business folks.
Yeah. And Tony went off to go play football at Temple, right?
Yeah, Temple University, and we played junior college football together. So we both played at Glendale Community College.
Oh, okay.
Together, and then double transferred out to universities. And so another piece of that story, it gets a little fragmented. There's a lot of moving pieces.
I forgot you guys did. Actually, I kind of knew that you did. I just thought he just was like, because he was like,
he went to NAU at a high school
with Randy.
He did, and I had a similar thing. I went to a school in Colorado, and
is it Adams State?
Yeah, Adams State, a small Division II school, and it didn't pan out. And we were such close friends. I have to tell this story, and people have to understand this. Tony Angelo was the bully in third grade that beat you up, right?
Yeah.
And it was my first day of school. I remember my teacher's name. Her name was Mrs. Magruder. And I was sensitive then like I am now. And I was all alone on the playground. And there was this kid that was chasing me around and harassing me. And
he was faster than you.
A lot faster than me and still is. And had a lot of friends kind of following him around like a little a group of thieves and thugs. And I remember telling the teacher, oh my gosh, this kid is going to beat me up. Now, the funny part of this story is he's Italian, right? And so she said, who? And I said, that Mexican kid. Mind you, you're in third grade, right? So there's some innocence to it.
Yeah.
And so Mrs. Magruder thought it would be a great idea if she called my mom and Tony's mom, and we would become friends because it was my first day, right? So I often refer, and if Tony was here, he would laugh really hard. I have called him for over 20 years my forced friend. Because my mom and Mary and Angelo got together, and because of Mrs. Magruder, they started a friendship. They forced it on us, and we've been friends ever since. Still forced after all these years. Yeah,
that's crazy. So when you guys graduated, this is like a Tony Angelo podcast today too. He became a police officer, right?
And incredible. And it's pertinent to the story, the overall overriding story.
For
because
sure.
when you think about how you grew up, and like, it's funny, I watched all your podcasts before I started. And I was super excited about this because it actually means something to me. And if you had 10,000 podcasts, it's more meaningful for me to be in early than late. And I know you are going to be that guy that has millions of these, and you're really good at it. But for me, the story is where all the magic is.
For sure.
Totally.
It's like that's where and I think often we don't tell our kids the story, and our kids think we kind of jumped magically into this perfect athlete, or we got great grades, and there's all these assumptions made about your growth and how you arrived. Oftentimes with parents, you don't give your parents the street cred of the pain that they've been through and the struggles that they have, which often become like the most meaningful parts of your life when you're older, when wisdom finally hits. So it's interesting, all these names that people will hear, they're the characters of your life, and you're always hearing people say, hey, write your own story.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand early, who are the characters? You can choose the characters, right? And you can also choose what role you play. And he played a very vital role in my life, extremely vital. And it's funny, he's a forced friend, right? Like, here's this family, not my biological father, but my father, Iles-Cremieux, he was a French immigrant. And Tony's family is Italian, so there was this connection there. My father and Tony's dad became best friends.
Oh, wow.
And, so it's like a lot of really meaningful things here. And my life, which wasn't a lot about athletics, the minute Tony entered into it, became all about athletics, right? And so interesting aspect of that relationship.
Right.
And if you know John's this incredibly intelligent guy, very cerebral, like literally, like, if there's a picture of a CEO, it should be his face. He's just incredible.
He carries himself in that fashion, which makes it super beneficial for him in this real estate world because he carries himself.
He does
a little bit better than a lot of other people.
He does.
So you look to go hire this guy, and he's just so polished.
And if you've known him, he's been like that since high school. Yeah, he's been polished.
I have a picture in this album of him when he was our homecoming king.
Yes.
Yeah, he was just
he was also a stud, too, by the way.
He was. Like,
super handsome, very charismatic.
And you think of genetics, like his mom and him are identical. He looks like his father, but he is his mom's. His mom was a school teacher. Mary Ann's a school teacher, and incredibly brilliant, And Tony, kind of more like his father, I would think, in a lot of ways, and looks like his mom's side of the family. Actually looks like his grandpa, Phil Amendola, looks like his twin. Right. So it's funny when you see these things, like, kids sometimes will take one of those lanes, and that's what it is in your DNA, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting dynamic.
So we talked about this before too, and I may say this quote incorrectly, but there was, I don't know, YouTube quote, or it was Ray Lewis giving a speech to a. Have you seen this?
I don't know.
Okay. He was giving a commencement speech to a small college. I think it was Trinity maybe or something like that, and he was talking about, getting out of the hood, right? And he's like, I didn't want to leave. He goes, but I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable outside of that world.
Yeah.
And he goes, show me your crowd, I'll show you your future.
Oh, so true.
Is that what it was?
Something like that. Can't remember.
Show me your crew, show me your crowd, show me, and I'll show you your future.
Yeah, I think it was crowd.
And so, true. I mean, going back, you're right on kind of who you roll with, and it's to this day. And those people are going to change, right? Dramatically, like you said, you've lived two different lives, two different names, two different worlds. There's probably been 5 different versions, right? And it's been that way for me too. Going back to what you're talking about, your kids and how, they don't understand the pain, but I find myself sometimes going, I forget sometimes too how exactly, like, when I look at them and I'm like, my expectations and stuff of everything that they need to do, from sports or to academics to, like, what are you doing in your future? What are you going out? Who are you hanging out with? I often sometimes take a step back and go, dude, I wasn't that great. Like, there was many mistakes that I made along the way. A lot of the same things that they do, I did. Yeah. But it's harder to take it when they're your own kid, and it's hard, and you want them to not do the same things you did, but sometimes I find myself punishing them in a way as if I've never even, that's disgusting. How could you even do it? And I was way worse in a lot of ways. So
do you ever find yourself like, I can actually remember when my parents were doing that to me when I was young. Now I do it to my kids. And I've often now look at my mom and what our relationship is now as forecasting what I'm about to go through. Like, you can see these different stages of life. Like, I can see my mom was so involved in everything in my life when I was younger, and she misses being that involved. And as you grow and you become the parent, and the roles reverse. And I think it's super helpful in understanding like how your parents feel about certain monument points in kids' lives. But you're exactly right. Like, I don't know why I'm this way, but I'm very intense. And I played intense sports. Soccer is an intense sport. Some people don't think it is, but it is.
It's very
and
intense.
Football is a very intense sport. And since the football went from, high school to college to junior college to college, it had such a long run in my life. Like, it almost made everything so intense. Winning and losing was so incredibly important to me. And I found myself out of my depth a lot with my kids, saying things to them, and they're like, really? Is that true? And I always tease. I'm like, no, that's not true. Like, I literally made a joke to my kids last night. We all went out to dinner at Siena Gavi over here for Taco Tuesdays, and my daughter's boyfriend.
Great spot.
Yeah, my daughter's boyfriend's with us. His name's Toby. We call him Perfect Toby because he's perfect. My son does not like the nickname. And so we're in the car, and I just turn around to him and I go, I had straight A's and got a football scholarship. And everybody started dying laughing really hard. It's like my need to be the center of attention.
Right.
And now has become a joke. And my son actually called my mom and said, what was his GPA? And I'm sad to report, I think it was 2.8.
Yeah, they were not straight A's in high school.
Was not good, which is, I hope that doesn't get out to our senior leadership. Corporate parent. They'll
Pretty
be
sure
like,
they're not going to care.
Maybe we made the wrong choice.
That is so funny. So, all right. So let's get to, you get done with New Mexico playing football. And so you've had this like run of being kind of like the man for a long time. And then now you got to figure out what you're going to do with your life. And one of the things you said to me like a few weeks ago when we were talking on the phone, you're like, I still don't know what I want to do with like who I want to be in my life. So, but struggling like out of college is tough, dude, trying to figure out, where to go. So what was your first thing you kind of dove into out of college?
It's crazy. Like, looking back on it, it's unbelievable because I think, Tony Angelo led me to the football lane. The football lane grew up to me being the first kid in my biological family to actually go to college, right? And so and I remember there's some pressure. I wasn't so in love with football that I wanted to go. And I remember Tony Angelo calling me and saying, you have to go. I remember thinking to myself, I don't really want to go. I'm good at football. I'm not that good. Maybe I need to start making money. And Tony was like, no, you gotta go. And I remember my mom saying to me, my mom is gonna be so proud when you graduate. And I could feel that it was meaningful for the people around me. And I went, and I had an amazing experience. And the minute it ended, I had this extreme identity crisis. And I wasn't even ready for it. But if now looking back, and I remember feeling so stressed out as the graduation neared. And I believe I was stressed out because I didn't know what I wanted to be. My dad was a real estate agent. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And really the only thing that I knew was real estate, right? So I didn't know what to do. So I actually, when I was coming home, my dad was like, hey, why don't you take a month off? You're going to be working the rest of your life. I actually went to Mexico City with John Angelo. And he was in the Peace Corps in Nicaragua at the time. Yeah, like John's was a Peace Corps guy, but Chuck Levinus, who's now a fireman, they were also doing those type of things, and they said I could spend a little bit of time with them while they kind of traveled through Mexico. So I did that for a little bit, and then when I came back, there's this book called The Seven Principles.
Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
There's that one that's really good, and there's another one, The Seven Life Principles of Leonardo da Vinci, and I think it's Jonathan Gelb. I think the last name of the author is Gelb. But there's one of those principles that has been present in my entire life, and it's Connessione, which is Italian for connections, the interconnectedness of life. And often it's invisible. You don't realize how impactful a meaningless moment is until you're older and you look back at your life, and it literally looks and feels and hears, like sounds like a symphony, because you can see those not meaningful moments were incredibly meaningful. So there was a guy in junior college that Tony Angelo knows named Lee DeVries. And Lee DeVries also went to the 4-year university out of junior college with me. We were roommates. And he was an incredible human being, now passed away in a car accident, one of my closest friends. And when we got out of college, he had a girlfriend. And we were all over at his house one night, and he said, Bubba needs a job. We need to find him a job. And I didn't have a job yet.
Right.
And his girlfriend said, I work at this place, and they all drive really nice cars. And I'm like, yeah, like what? And she's like Ferraris. They drive Ferraris. And I remember all of us laughing really hard. And I was like, Ferraris. And she's like, yeah. Like one of the guys has a Ferrari. And I'm like, what do they do? And she's like, something in real estate. She was the front desk,
Right.
receptionist. And she said, they're hiring an intern. And I said, all right, well, get me the information. So I immediately put in for this job, and they were looking for an intern. And it wasn't even paying. The way they described it to me in the interview was, you can work here. We basically peddle land and lots to home builders. It was a land brokerage. And if you are helpful in us doing that, we'll pay you $24,000 a year. And when you make commissions, you can pay us back the 24. And that was like a draw, right?
Yeah.
And there was a Ferrari. That was true. It was Mr. Phil DeAngelis. He was the principal. So there was two gentlemen, Phil DeAngelis and Michael Martindale, who became my mentors. Probably two of the most meaningful male relationships I've ever had in my entire life, and set me off on a trajectory that, I didn't even know I was going to be on. And all through what? A relationship of a college athlete that I knew, and a girlfriend that he had, and a small conversation on an off night.
Yeah.
Right? Where no one wanted to go out, and we all just want to, and you end up in this place where you're supposed to be. And I worked for those gentlemen for 5 years after that. But that's how I found what and people often ask me, even my kids, like, how do you know? And I said, I didn't know. And I'll be 50 this February, and I still don't know. I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be, but I honestly, I feel like I'm still not doing what I'm meant to do, right? I often feel a lot of people feel that way at their lives, but they're doing the closest thing that they know how to do or what to do,
right.
And often that leads you somewhere else, where you're
right.
supposed
Sometimes
to be.
what you want to do isn't going to provide you with the economic situation that you need in order to live your life that you want to provide for your family.
Right.
So you do the things that makes you happy, but it doesn't mean that, I'm sure John probably loved being in the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
We had this conversation with Brian North on one of these. It hasn't been released yet, but he's same sort of,
Yeah.
Do I really want to? I want to run a company, but I want to run a company where I'm doing more of leading by personal development than I am business.
And that's life, right? Isn't that interesting? When you think about it, that's life. But life is the difference between understanding. We're going to make a lot of choices, and there's going to be the wrong choices and the right choices. Sometimes you don't even know if they're wrong or right for years.
Oh yeah.
But the interesting part is that's why I feel like everything's right, and failure is the key. You have to fail a lot to realize that you're in the wrong spot or that you need something else. It happens often in marriages. Tony's recently married again, and so happy at his 50th birthday party the other day. And one of the things I talked about, we all got up and spoke. Randy Rivera came in from San Diego and spoke, and a bunch of his college football buddies. But we talk about this in our lives, our failures, our shortcomings, and how there's new beginnings and more happiness.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the biggest tragedy is some people can't let go of where they're at and when they're unhappy, and they can't transition into that next phase. And it's interesting when I'm with people like you and we know each other from childhood, right? There's childhood perceptions, right? Like athlete, student, business wizard, all these different things. And we kind of box people up. And then when you have these deeper conversations with them, you realize like, oh my gosh, I did not know that they had this piece of them. And it's probably been there for forever.
Right. Yeah. Tony, I don't know him that well, but I would like the vision of him. It's just, is this, the masculine, just the cop.
I love that you say that too, because what's so funny about that is I've known him forever, since third grade to now. He's probably, he's an incredible human being. He's that stoic Division I college football player, Italian guy, police officer, and he's a sergeant. He's now at the academy. He teaches at the academy. He's a teacher. He's always been a teacher. Like I could always envision him teaching and mentoring somebody. But I will tell you, like, he is one of the softest, kindest, caring people I've ever met in my entire life. And what is on his outside is a protective gear that every police officer has. Every, he has like almost a false outside to kind of keep people out and at bay. But when you really know him, there's an incredibly caring and intelligent person there, a very thoughtful person. Some of my most favorite moments in my life are debates with him, politics, sports. Or I remember at the time when the war started in Iraq, I remember my dad's a Vietnam veteran. I remember Tony and me and my dad staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning talking about, all the issues of the time. And still to this day, I'm shocked at the things that come out of his mouth. Like he's very well
educated and
very,
cool.
very thoughtful guy. And sometimes you don't know that unless you dig deeper, right? And I think like what that term that I told you guys earlier, that Connessione, it's so important. I think that's what it's all about. You know that movie with Jim Carrey where he says yes to everything?
Yeah.
Yes, man.
Yes, man. Like it is a hilarious movie, but there's something about that movie that like it rings true to me. It's about like saying yes to life. And sometimes there's deeper meaning in some of those experiences that you have, right? Even when you think it's not something that is meant for you. I think the longer I know Tony and the conversations that I have sometimes that are uncomfortable for me, because we are literally polar opposites. We're not the same politically. We're not the same economically. We're like opposites. Yeah. So we often are agitators in each other's life. And still to this day, we have tumultuous relationships. We're like brothers. Yeah. We're incredibly close. We argue more than we get along. So it's interesting that you say that, because I felt that way for many, many years. And then all of a sudden it's like, as I unpeel that onion, I'm like, gosh, he's not that guy. He's way more than I think he is often.
Real Talk is brought to you by escrow, the letter S, grow. Disorganization and constant communication are huge problems in the real estate journey. And it's an issue that I think most real estate agents, well, at least some real estate agents, struggle with in their CRM systems. There's a lot of options out there, and a lot of people have different ones. And when I'm speaking with the agents that we work with, or that are our referral partners, the big hurdle is the actual creation of the templates and actually creating the automation that goes out for milestones. So escrow kind of takes all that away. So everything's pre-written for you. You have multiple choices to go from, to choose from, I'm sorry. So if you're looking for a CRM system that is super easy to use and will eliminate a lot of the confusion and the heavy lifting up front, visit escrowcrm.com for more information. Do you still stay in contact with the mentors from the land? Is that company still in business, or those guys? This is a long time ago. So
as I was driving over here, I literally was like tearing up a little bit, because I knew I was going to talk about hopefully some things that are, sensitive for me. I feel like these are only meaningful. Like if you watch these, they're only meaningful if you're talking about things that matter, right? Yep. Like it's a dude thing. Like you're going to laugh and have a lot of fun, but there's also, I think, some important things that everybody should know about. I told you off camera that I've always felt very low self-esteem, very insecure, very like I wasn't going to be successful in my life. And when I met these two men, Phil DeAngelis and Michael Martindale, they were incredibly successful. They were both making multiples of millions of dollars a year. And so their job was basically they entitled land with farmers and ranchers, did the illegal entitlements to turn those into lots, sold those lots.
Is that like Land Advisors does that now?
Yeah, exactly. Land Advisors, and the most successful one in town is Nate Nathan.
Yeah, Nate
Nathan. And he's incredible.
Yeah.
So he was like the epitome of it. And these guys actually created their business plan to compete with Nate. Their whole business plan was, if we could take 10% of the market share away from Nate, we could make a lot of money. And Nate will kind of always jokingly say, retail, not detail. Nate's going to sell it to you. Yeah. And the detail people do the detail, you dig into the deal. These guys were the detail, not retail guys. These guys were they created a book, and that book had like every home builder's DNA in it, like what product they built,
right?
What municipalities they were building in, and when they were about to close out of a community, where would the refill, where would the extension community come from, and what would the price be? And they were constantly thinking ahead. They were brilliant guys. And the main guy's name was Phil DeAngelis, who I'm still very close friends with today, and he's literally changed my life. He has taken somebody who did not have a trade, and he literally, just by watching him and listening to him, you learn this piece of the business. Now he's kind of like the godfather, the guy behind the scenes, in the meetings. We would literally sit in these meetings with maps all over the walls, and we would talk about every land parcel.
What year was this?
Gosh, this was
2000?
2000. I got out of school, I think, in 94. I think I started working for them in 96, and I worked for them all the way to 2000. So there's a good 4 to 5 year run. Highly sophisticated, highly intelligent. My first 2 years there was just trying to acclimate, in all honesty. Like I didn't
trying to fit in.
I didn't understand it, and I was still so goofy, and I was trying to like feel good about myself, and I wasn't making any money. I could barely like take care of myself, like barely had enough money to have an apartment, and these guys were really, really good. So Phil kind of ran all that piece of it, but there was another guy whose name was Michael Martindale, and he was kind of the voice and the face of the company. Phil was an introvert, Michael was an extrovert, and Michael was the relationship guy. He knew all the division presidents with all the home builders. So you can imagine my world. All of a sudden, I'm seeing these two guys making tons of money. They had guys working for them that were incredibly bright. A guy named Derek Harris and Joe Kachuri, an office manager named Sheila Whittington, who's now like a life coach, who's incredible, and a research data guy in the back that was like the brain, Todd Vesledal. These names are like seared into my...
I was going to say, dude, your memory of names are so good.
And it's because these people were all incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, and they had a machine. They knew what they were doing, and they executed. It was precise.
Yeah.
And they started gaining market share. They did get to that 10%, and then they got to the 20%, and then they were just gaining, and then they would create new business ventures. They created a land development company because they were trying to capture more profitability. They were bright. And I remember they would bring division presidents through. Ultimately, I'm a division president now, and they would bring land guys and girls and division presidents through the office. And I sat way in the back in a cubicle. So they would say, I'm going to throw out some names here. They would go, Alan Jones, who's still the division president for Lennar Homes. Alan Jones is coming to the office today at 10 o'clock. And Alan Jones would come in, and they would parade him around the circular loop. And me and the other, algae eaters in the back were back there working. And they would say, Frenchy, this is Alan Jones. And they were like literally superheroes. We were
right.
Like, there's Alan Jones.
Right, right.
And we didn't even know. And Alan Jones was the land guy for Lennar at the time. He's now the division president. And so they would bring him back up, and they would have a strategy meeting. They would talk about land deals. We weren't in those meetings. We were working in the back. And so I would see these names constantly of these people. And so as you can imagine, as years would go by, I would allow myself to go, am I going to be a Phil DeAngelis? Am I going to be a Michael Martindale? Am I going to be a Todd Vesledal? Am I going to be a Alan Jones? So I started to think about all these different roads that I possibly could be, right? And back to your quote that you said, like, you are who you hang out with, right? Show me your gang, will show you your future. It's so true, because I had to change. Like, that would have never have been my life where I am today unless those men stepped in and showed me that it was possible. And I think they knew that I was not mentally ready for it. Like, in all honesty, I think if they were really aggressive, they would have fired me in the first year. And
I mean, we talked about this like imposter syndrome that you deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, you obviously were dealing with insecurities and you're like around all these brilliant people. How many was it often you're like, dude, I can't do this, I'm gonna quit?
Yes. And I remember the one guy that I reported to, you know, it was a great guy and named Derek Harris, and he was young and so smart and so successful, and he would constantly say to me, I don't think you're getting it. I don't think you're getting it. And I would worry about it, right? Like the minute I would get home, I would be like, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm getting it, you know? And there wasn't like, it's funny now, hindsight 2020, look back there, like wasn't much to get.
Right.
I think what I wasn't getting was I wasn't passionate. Like I wasn't really in it to win it. Like I wasn't there, you know? And I think part of that was my identity was I was a football player.
Yeah.
And when that ends, when you're no longer special, when you're no longer the center of attention, I dealt with all of my, with all of my problems in life, I dealt with physically, right? You can imagine I was very physical. So I was a specimen at the time. And people, like I was a naturally gifted athlete, but I ran a 4.40. I benched 225 25 times. I think Reggie Bush and I have the same combine stats. Like I could play, and so that piece, like letting go of that, took years.
Yeah.
Like I remember people, like I'd be 2-3 years into this place, the company's name was Commerce Realty Advisors. And I would be out with friends and somebody would say, what do you do? And I oftentimes, without catching myself, I would say, I play college football.
Wow.
And this was years beyond. And I knew that there was a problem there. And my dad used to tease me and say, hey, you know, like the Bruce Springsteen song, Glory Days, like you need to get away from that. And I finally broke free. But when I broke free, it was from, being very, hardworking and dedicated. I literally remember the day that I thought to myself, I'm gonna work 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. I think I was 28 when I said that to myself, and I've done that from that day forward. I literally work 7 days a week at a minimum 14, 15-hour days. I go in every day, regardless. It doesn't matter. And if my wife was here, she would tell you I don't take a lot of vacations. Yeah. If you look at my vacation pictures, people think I vacation a lot, but you'll notice I'm not in any of them. They're my family. My wife and my kids are in the pictures. I'm typically here, but.
So the pictures of the horses and stuff and
you'll notice I'm not in any of those.
Those,
that's my wife and the kids. They're doing stuff, and home building has a unique, we're always
it's running. A weekend gig.
We're running to the end of the month, to the end of the quarter, to the end of the year. And there's monument points there. So it's like taking off time is not like a building cultural thing built for success. And you have to have a well balanced life. But for me, it wasn't there. So. Those guys literally gave me everything. And here, right at the beginning of COVID, Michael Martindale passed away. And it was, it chokes me up a little bit now because I didn't sometimes realize the impact that those two had on my life. And I remember I was out driving communities with Richmond, and I got a phone call from Todd Vesledahl. And then 5 minutes later, I got a phone call from Sheila Whittington. And then 5 minutes later, I got a phone call from Phil DeAngelis. And my heart broke. I just pulled off to the side of the road, and I knew that somebody had passed away. And I was hoping it was, you sit there and you realize, when those moments are coming, right? And you feel them creeping up. And I remember pulling off to the side of the road and feeling really emotional. And for a guy like me who, I never have felt smart. I've never, even when I played football, I've never been the best player on the team, any sports. Like I've always been mid-range guy that works really hard. And I remember feeling so, as the years went on and I got some of these jobs that had titles. Yeah. I remember feeling so grateful that Michael and Phil allowed me to be thought of that way by others. Like I felt like they had created the illusion that I am today. Right. When we talk about the syndrome. Yeah. The imposter syndrome, which I feel like I have. Those guys were so dedicated to that. And when I left working there, so I left there and I went to work for a home builder.
That must have been tough to make that call.
They never stopped doing those things for me though, because you can imagine when home builders were coming in and saying, hey, we need a land guy. Yeah. They were saying things like, well, Michael Iles-Cremieux works at KB Home and he'd be a great guy for you. He's really smart.
Yeah.
So they were mentoring me. It didn't stop when I stopped
They
working
promoted
there.
you
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever. And people like Nate Nathan have done that as well. Like they've been very near and dear and close to my heart because they've done that. And I've worked so closely with them on it's like you, like when you're working on loan by loan, transaction by transaction, land transactions with title companies and land sellers and land brokers, you become very close with that small knit group of people, and they're very good people. So all of a sudden, a lot of the networking when people are looking for jobs or looking for leaders in organizations, they talk to those people like, well, who's fun to deal with?
Yeah.
Who's a good person that has good qualities that we
that
think
connect. What's the word you said?
Yeah, that Connessione.
Connessione.
Yeah, the interconnectedness of life, like how we're all connected. And they're invisible lines. Like somebody could go, I know Ryan Madrid, he's with VIP, and I know Frenchy, he's with Richmond, and VIP does their turndowns. But do they really understand the invisible line that ties you and I together?
Right.
Like, I went to high school with your sister. I knew you as a young man.
Yep.
Like I knew your mom and your dad.
Right.
Still to this day, do you know that I have, I really want to have a big backyard. I always have wanted an acre backyard. You know why?
Because we had one.
Because you had one.
Yeah.
Like, and I was in that backyard and I was like, I remember like it was yesterday. I was like, this is the most, like, oh my gosh, like that house was stunningly gorgeous. And
going back to that, just and we've touched on this a couple of times, but I always like to say when you were talking about the very beginning, we were like, yeah, I'm from the west side.
Yeah.
And
acre irrigation.
Yeah. Like people don't understand how incredible our neighborhood was.
Well, and I don't think we understood how incredible it was. I remember when the production homes on the other side of 67th Avenue, like where Chandra lived, when those production homes started going.
High school area.
Yeah. I'm like, why don't we have a red tile roof and stucco? And
Trisha, I could name the friends right now that had your type of home that I used to spend time with. Randy Rivera.
Brett Powers.
Sean Duguid.
Sean Duguid. I was in all these. I remember, and I was in a Sean Carey production home, right?
Yep.
So I remember thinking like, wow, this is so amazing. But we also had, like, when you think about these invisible lines, like, we had an incredible friend group. I mean, talk about the friend of friends. I mean, not to brag, and it's a podcast, but I will tell you, like, Brett Powers, starting quarterback at Ohio State University. Randy Rivera, one of the most successful.
Surgeon, by the way.
Yeah,
surgeon.
Orthopedic surgeon.
Randy Rivera, like Shauna, who's in medical and starting her own business. You, from your photography, art to all the business. Like, I could
Michelle, Mish,
yes,
CPA.
That's what I mean. I can go name by name and just like, there were so many incredibly smart kids and good human beings, and the parents were really connected and good human beings. The football coach, completely random, but Larry Feckenheier, second most winningest football coach in Arizona State history.
He passed away this last year.
No, not Larry, but Jack Alterzitz.
Jack did.
One of the most winningest.
No, Larry doesn't work there anymore. That's what it is.
doesn't work there. And incredible, like another a mover of men. You know, and sometimes probably not the way that everybody wanted him to move, right? Like he's not.
That was old school, though.
Old school, not loving you up, but I'll tell you, like, Larry Feckenheier, like, it's another, like, invisible string. Like, I will tell people, like, every time something really bad has happened to somebody that was on that team, and we're all still friends to this day, Larry Feckenheier's present. Like, Jason Thompson lost his leg in a car accident. There were 3 people in that emergency room when he got out. Larry Feckenheier, Tony Angelo, and me.
Wow.
So like some of these things, as you get older, you realize the responsibility of being an adult isn't always, kind of kissing ass. Sometimes it's giving tough love and telling people that they need to be somewhere where they're not. And Larry was one of those people. I think Phil DeAngelis and Michael Martindale with Commerce Realty Advisors, they were also those people. Like, they know me well enough to know that there's a goofy part of me, right?
Right.
And a part of me that needs to be more serious to be professional. And they were always there to go, hey, it's time to step up. It's time to do these things. And now that Michael's passed away, we were unable to have a funeral because COVID hit right as that was happening. And so there's been no funeral. I literally have his wife sent out this card, kind of announcing his end of life. And it's on my desk, and I'm like hoping that there'll be a celebration of life. And I think that's one of the difficult things with COVID that kind of kind of comes into this story as well is like some people have not even been able to see the bodies of their loved ones that have passed away. And this has been one of those things I've wanted kind of a goodbye, right? And you don't get that. But I also get to work with Phil DeAngelis. He sells land still and owns a lot of land. And so we're doing a lot of land deals with him. So I still get to have that relationship. And he often teases me. He's like, if I could have looked back at all the people that we had work for us, I would have not have picked you to be the one that was going to be the president. And we laugh really hard about it, right? Like, because he views me in a different way. And so it's just how those roads turn.
Yeah. So when you left and you went over to a builder, did you go to KB?
I did. So it was an interesting story. You know, it got to this point, the market was really moving and those guys were making a lot of money. And it got to a point, this is my perception of what happened. And trust me, I'm sure it's different on everybody's side, but there was another guy like me that worked in the back office. His name was Mike Aiello, and just an incredible human being, like just one of the nicest, most gentlest men ever, and very talented. Now works in home building as well. It was our turn to graduate into the land brokerage part of it and start making some real money.
Yeah.
So I remember this, we got a raise from I think $24,000 a year to $32,000 a year. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I was like, I can afford toilet paper.
Right.
Like, now I have made it.
No, you went and bought a BMW.
Yeah, I'm like, I made it. You know what's funny? I didn't date that entire time, by the way, because I felt unworthy. I didn't want to like have a girl know that like
you're broke.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was just alone and isolated.
Yeah.
And Tony Angelo's beat, City of Phoenix police officer, was where I worked. He would stop by my house at 3 o'clock in the morning and knock on my door and flash flashlights in my head. So I was like, this story like goes on forever.
Yeah.
So my pain was shared throughout the friend group. But I remember KB Home was hiring, and I came in late to work at Commerce one night, really late, and I found a piece of paper on the printer. And it was an inter-office email between two of the younger brokers and the two principals. And it was basically an argument between the four of them about not wanting to share more of the business and more of the money with Mike and I, the other lower level guy. Mm-hmm. And it broke my heart. I saw it, it devastated me so much, and I couldn't go back. Like, I was so upset. We made these maps. You'll laugh at this. I'm not sure if you've ever seen them, but we had these Landiscore maps, and we would cut them and tape them all together, and then we would lay a plastic clear vellum over them, and we would put numbers on them and tie them to a computer system. This was old school, like tape each parcel outline. Like it would be like, think about the neighborhood you lived in. Like if there was a 10-acre parcel, we would outline in red tape. 10 acres, put the number 10 on it, tie it to a computer system and say, number 10 is the Madrid family. They own 10 acres at the southwest corner, and it's the general plan is, and we would put a yellow vellum over the top of it. It's yellow for low density. You could put 1 acre lots on it. And that's what we did all day long. Yeah. And so when I saw that email, I was devastated, and I was like, they really don't want me here. And I'd been there, I think, 4 or 5 years at the time. And I did a really unprofessional thing. I sent an email that said, I gave my 2-week notice, and Phil DeAngelis was on a month-long vacation in Hawaii. So he was gone for 30 days. I think that's part of the reason why I did it, because if he was there, I probably wouldn't have been able to quit. So I said, I'm gone in 2 weeks, and I just left at the end of the 2 weeks without a job, by the way. And I think 2 days after I was out of there, I answered a call with a local land headhunter here for a forward planning manager position at KB Home. And I went to KB Home, and I was only there for about a year or two. And one of the leaders in that land department left there and went to Richmond and brought me with him. Just basically said, hey, come with me. And each one of those times, my salary doubled. Right. Like it kept, like the market was really starting to move. And I took all the things, and here's another crazy part of the story is, even though I felt really like not that knowledgeable at the Commerce Realty Advisor, I felt like I was trying to really get there. This really crazy thing happened, and I think it happens to a lot of people, but when I landed at KB Home, I had this really unique skill set that those guys had given me that no one else had. No one else was talking to city council members, planning and zoning commission members, zoning attorneys. They didn't know all the other leaders of land departments across all the other builders. Heck, they didn't even know all the builder people. I did. I knew all of them. I knew the attorneys that were working on the zoning cases. I knew what whether or not, Gilbert Town staff would support medium density on a site versus not. I knew all the landowners. And so the next thing you know, I'm in all these meetings at KB Home when I get the job, and they're like, we can't get an easement of the adjacent landowner. And I'm like, well, that's the Udall family. That's Dave Udall. And they were like, he won't return our phone call. And I'm like, well, I have his number. I'll call him. And then I would call him, and Dave would say, yeah, I'll give you that easement. And I knew all these people. And then the next thing, like after a few months of that, the vice president of land in that group was like, I think you're in the wrong department. I think you need to be more in land. You know all these people. So I had this gift that was given to me from these Commerce Realty Advisors guys that I didn't even realize that I had, right? I went to a home builder, and they were like, whoa, like that's really meaningful. Like that's good stuff. And it elevated me. It made me look more professional. It made me look like there was...
Now you were the smart guy.
Now I was the smart guy for the first time in my life. And I was so grateful. I cannot even describe to you. And fortunately, for the first time in my life, I think I was aware. Yeah. Like sometimes you're not aware that you've been given a gift. Yeah. I was super aware and thankful. And I just kept trying to build off of that and continue it and keep it. And I knew that it was an angle I could have because I didn't have this great education. Like I didn't go to New York University. I don't have an MBA, right? Like you look at guys that do my job, a lot of them have MBAs. A lot of them have gone to Ivy League schools. A lot of them are I'm not. I went to a small university. I didn't have a great GPA. I'm a corporate executive for the largest division in Richmond American Homes. We generated $440 million of home closing revenue this year. That was a gift given to me by Michael Martindale and Phil DeAngelis, two smarty pantses.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
Because this is my perception, and I know a lot of land guys, especially like they're not land guys within a builder, just like land guys, like Nathan, those groups, land advisors, and from a financial income standpoint. Yeah. Do you ever go, damn, I should have just done that? Because those guys make a lot.
They make a lot of money.
And you knew everybody and knew everything that you at that point, like you could have gone out to Buckeye before Verrata was built, and you could have brokered that whole deal for.
I lack the courage. To start your own business takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to not get a paycheck for a certain period of time until you start getting paychecks. One of the things I've learned about myself, and I think it's from sports, is I flourish in highly disciplined environments with a lot of structure. Yeah. Like I really flourish in them. Like I like having a boss. I like being told what to do. I think it's probably why I married who I married. I've been married for 18 years, and she wears the pants in the family. She makes every financial decision. Even though I'm a president of a company, my wife, she makes the financial decisions. And I like it. Like I like that relationship that we have. I always have. And I remember somebody coming to me and offering me that opportunity. And I remember being absolutely terrified of it. And I knew you can make 10 plus million a year doing something like that, right? And to me, isn't it funny? Like the reward of the money was not enough over my fear of the potential failure. And I'll be 50 in February, and I'll tell you that's one of the most unattractive qualities that I believe I have. Like I am at times the most courageous person that I've ever known with and I know a lot of people. I am physically very tough. I can suffer more than the natural human being. Like I can endure verbal abuse, physical, like I can do it all. And I think football has a lot to do with that because that's the culture in collegiate football.
You don't get bent out of shape when someone yells at you
not at all.
Work and tells you you're failing.
I don't take it personally at all. I actually think I see the message. The message is to grow and improve. But it's like, that's one of the qualities, like I was a land guy, and in my opinion, I felt like I was the best land guy in the state of Arizona. I felt like I had worked that system for a really long time. And 6 years ago, Richmond came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to come be our division president?" And they knew exactly who I was.
Were you at Richmond? So you left Richmond and went to Meritage?
So when I left KB Home, I was there for 2 years and met the most amazing people there, and still strong relationships and a meaningful Connessione, a meaningful invisible line, right? Yeah. And then Richmond, a guy left there named Harry Lurimore and told me of an opportunity, and I kind of followed him. I don't even think he knows I followed him, but I followed him. I followed him, and ended up at Richmond. And Richmond was probably the most meaningful experience I've had in my life. Like commerce, they were so smart. It was so specialized, and it gave me this skill set where people for the first time in my life thought I was actually, smart. Yeah. But Richmond, the thing that really defines Richmond is it's their experience, their leadership. The two guys that have been running that company for a long time, David Madrids and Larry Meisel, they're icons in the industry, and they're known for their shrewdness and their conservatism and their leadership and their consistency, and they've been there forever, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And when I got there, it was such an incredibly structured system. I mean, they're a little bit of a pain in the ass to deal with when buying land because they are so cross the T and dot the I.
Right.
And they have a guy that works there, that still works there. His name's Ron Milzer. So when I was a forward planning manager there and I was turning in the land books, this Ron Milzer guy would, give me 120 questions on how that project could fail, and I had to answer them. Wow. And this guy is one of the most wicked, smart men ever, just incredible. But I remember thinking to myself, like, this rite of passage, I can answer these 120 questions. And the longer I was there, and I worked there for 7 years, and it's not an easy place to work, right? Because they are champions of excellence. So if you're not about excellence and you're not committed and you're not working hard, you'll flame out there fast. Yeah. So it was like this sense of pride for me. Like when you're doing something really hard and you know that it's meaningful, right? Like it's like David Goggins, you're gonna make it through buds and become a Navy SEAL. To me, it was like, you can make it at Richmond for a really long period of time. And it's meaningful, that's an accomplishment. And I was there for 7 years and I learned so much, but their system was like, I became a systems expert, right? After the 7 years there, and I made it, and anybody watching, like when you understand where we are in the market, like that was I started there at the absolute run up. Like they had, I think, 20 active subdivisions when I started with them. And when I left in 7 years, they had 64 active subdivisions. They were building 3,000 homes a year, closing. And they were the third largest builder in the Phoenix MSA. And
it was like 05, 04, 05.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and then at the tail end of that, like I was there, like I think the last 2 years were when the market was just melting. What Steve Hilton, who I went to work for next, refers to as the lost decade. And that recession then started, right? So I was with them during that entire run up. And I went from forward planning manager, a guy in a cubicle, to a vice president of land acquisition, working both in their Tucson and in their Phoenix market. And then after that 7 years, I left. I think it was May of 2008. I left and took a job with Steve Hilton, who's now, I think, just retired. He was the CEO of Meritage Homes, who you guys also do a lot of business with. Yep. And that's actually how I first met Austin Bates with you guys. He was doing the turn down lending for Meritage Homes. So I went there, and it's funny because I'm super reflective on why I have the tools in the tool belt that I have today. And what's interesting about it is when the recession hit, it was like everybody got knocked down again to base level mediocrity, right? Because if you're a land guy, you're not buying land.
Right.
So the next thing that happened to me was, hey, it's a recession. We don't really need a land guy. Yeah. And so I had to find value. And where did I find value? Back at that Commerce Realty Advisor skill set. I went back and I created a spreadsheet. I literally started to track every single land asset in Tucson and in Phoenix as it left the hands of a builder, an investor, a landowner, back to a bank. Mm-hmm. And what bank was it? Mm-hmm. And if it was a bank, what was the name of the asset manager and his phone number? And
with the idea of like capturing it.
The idea to me was, I don't know how long this recession is going to last, and I need to provide some value. And if I could go to a guy like David Madrids and Larry Meisel and say, hey, there's 150 finished lots on the ground that are deliverable that a bank wants to sell today in the Tucson market, and there's 3,000 in the Phoenix market. This is where they're located. These are the submarkets that they're in. This is the financial performer that says that you can compete with the tsunami wave of foreclosures that's out there right now. So meaning giving them an action plan to get back out and generate revenue. And I mapped out Like I literally did every parcel in the Phoenix metro area, every municipality. I think there was 41 municipalities and counties I was tracking in Phoenix and then in Tucson. So when everybody else was doing nothing, I was very active, right? And so I'll never forget this. One of the things Michael Martindale, the mentor that passed away, used to do that was so impressive is he would lay out these old Landescore maps. And anybody who's in land that's out there has seen these. Anybody who's in title, you've seen them up on the walls. So they're the giant aerial maps.
There's one in this office right here.
Yeah, right
it's
next
like
to you.
the entire wall.
So you're going to laugh at this. So there used to be some smaller versions of those. They weren't they were bigger than 11 by 17, but they would fit like on the top of a conference room table.
Yeah.
And so Michael Martindale used to lay them down, and a lot of the old guard guys and gals that are out there that would get this spiel from Michael when they went to Commerce, they'll know the moment I'm talking about. Michael would lay this Landescore map down, and he could take a magic marker, a black magic marker, and he would circle these submarkets. He would go, Gilbert, there's 100, there's 12 deals available in here right now on the size 50 wide lots. There's 8 deals with 60 wide lots. And he would know the product of that builder. And he would say, basically he was getting them to buy
other builders, stuff that was...
whether it was a developer selling land or a rancher selling land. So it usually was a home builder in there. So they would be like, Alan Jones at Lennar, you want to buy, you need to replace your 60s at Morrison Ranch. Here are your 5 options.
Right.
But he would draw on this map and he would do it by heart. And we would joke, like sometimes we'd be like, that's not
that's not true.
He's not that smart. He messed up. There's not 60 lots. There's 73. But
right.
He would do this. It was the most amazing thing. He would circle these things on the maps, and he would go through almost every submarket, and it was mind-boggling. I mean, you would leave that going, wow, he's really on top of it. And during this recession, I used to practice every night. I had this giant pile of those Landescore maps, and I would take them out, and I would write down the information that I was learning on the map. Like I would do the top 10 deals in every submarket. And remember, there's a lot of banks that didn't want to sell, right? Like they took it back from a family that lost it in a trust, and they would take it back and they would just sit on it until they thought that they could. And so I knew the debt on it. I knew how much the bank asset manager thought it was worth. So like if he wanted to sell it at $150,000 an acre and I thought it was worth 10, you knew they weren't going to market it or sell it. So I could communicate this to anybody out there, right? So I started practicing the top 10 deals in every market, Tucson and Phoenix. And I would do it every day. And as a practice, I would just write it down. And I'll never forget when I worked at KB Home, the division president was a guy by the name of Steve Davis, who was an incredible leader. At the time, it was one of the only African-American division presidents in the Phoenix market, and just an incredible human being and great leader, and ran a really robust business at KB Home. Left KB Home as a division president, I think, to be the chief operating officer at Meritage Homes. So I had history with him, right? So they call me in for an interview, and the front desk, talk about meant to be and invisible lines. I'm still have a job with Richmond. I've been there for 7 years, and I feel like they've been over backwards to kind of protect me and save me. And I do this like secret interview with Meritage, and I have to drive to Phoenix because I'm in Tucson at the time. And the lady at the front desk is the old front desk lady from Richmond named Arlene. So she jumps up and yells, Frenchy, and hugs me. She's the one that knows all the Bubbas, and my Kyles. Like she's getting those phone calls. And she's like, what are you doing here? And I go in and I actually meet with Steve Hilton, the CEO, and Steve Davis, who I knew as the COO. And I lay one of those Landescore maps out, and I have my Michael Martindale moment. Yeah. Which was really meaningful to me. And one of the things that Steve Hilton said to start the meeting that I loved was he said, there's no, my land guy's telling me there's no land deals in the Phoenix market. And so I went through and wrote down the top 10 land deals in every submarket. And I think—
How good did that feel?
It felt good for me. And I felt like, you'll laugh at this. Michael Martindale was a really good looking guy. It was kind of like, if like he's a good looking guy, a sharp dresser. I've tried to model kind of my look and my mental aptitude around Phil DeAngelis. Phil, also an incredibly good looking guy. And so I remember leaving that building thinking that was impressive. Like, I think I pulled that off. And I got the job. I'm not sure how well I pulled it off. Steve Hilton still teases me that I wasn't as great as I thought I was the entire time that I worked there. But like I ended up, and Steve, like, you know, one of the things about Steve Hilton too is he's another grinder, another guy who's all about excellence and about, you know, achievement and growth. And has not been an easy place, I think, for some folks to work in that environment. And I remember at the time, my mentor, Phil DeAngelis, had told me, I don't know if you want to work there because his land guys last about 12 months.
Yeah.
And I remember going through the names, and they were really good names, like strong candidates, right? Like really talented people. And then when you have that imposter syndrome like I do, I was like, oh, man, can I pull off that? Can I be as good? He had a guy named Tom Lemon, who's I think is one of the smartest men in the business ever, and a legacy guy, legend to me, icon in the business, landside. And I was like, I don't know if I can do the Tom Lemon dance for a long time, you know? And I remember taking the job, and I was there for 7 years, and I loved it. Like, I absolutely loved it. I loved working for Steve Hilton. It was another, and it was another culture that was about growth. And now no one was buying land at the time, so you have to mind, like, everybody that's out there thinking about this, and this is right when no other builder is buying land at all. And Steve Hilton hires me, and he wants to start buying land. So in May of 2008, we kind of stick our head out of the shell, and we buy a few deals. Steve Hilton and I do. Like, we get a few deals, and we start buying robustly. And we go from 11th in the marketplace in the 7 years I'm there to number one in permits and number two in closings, and ultimately number one in closings, I think, for a year, which is really a big deal because it's hard to stretch out beyond the D.R. Hortons and the Taylor Morrisons and the Pulte's that are so gigantic here. Yeah. But we bought so much land there. It was just
so. Did you have? Experience. So a lot of people were still very nervous, but the people that made it big were the people that had the guts to buy. During those times when everything was just plummeting, and there were so many opportunities, right? But you had to have the money and the guts to do so. So you guys went out and you started doing it and it started working.
You said it, like, I love the way you described that, Ryan, because that was all Steve Hilton. Like you said, I think, like, it's funny when you say that, I didn't think of it, but he had the guts. Like, Steve, very tough man. At the time it was, and it meant a lot for me to work for him. Down the office from my office was Steve Hilton's father, so he literally had a space in his office where his dad could work and have his dad close to him, which really resonated with me. I like that. Like, I felt like, and that was neat. And he was a really neat guy, and he would come down and talk to me a lot. And it was a meaningful experience, and you could see the love between those two. He passed away during my tenure there. But Steve had a lot of guts. I remember Steve telling me that when I said earlier the tsunami wave of foreclosures, I actually ripped that off. That's Steve's line. Steve used to say, how do we know when to buy, and how is our product going to compete against the tsunami wave of foreclosures that are out here? And one of the things that he did, he sent the division president at the time, who's still there, Fred Herman, and a bunch of us out to look at energy efficient technologies that are being used in production home building across the country. And they brought those all back. They hired a guy named C.R. Hero, who was kind of their VP of Green. We called him the Jolly Green Giant.
Was Meritage? They were like the forefront of that whole process,
They were,
right?
And this was their kind of identity. But this was another gutsy move. He wanted to identify himself different than the tsunami wave of competition, which was not new home production building. It was the
energy efficient.
It was the production. It was the resale. The used homes were not energy efficient. They were old. Yeah. And then he could say, these new homes are energy efficient. We actually had some energy efficient homes that were the meter went backwards. Like, they created more energy than they used. Right. And some of the very first ones we did, the very first one was in Verado. And we were incredibly proud of it. The Echo solar system, solar panel. I mean, again, a tremendous amount of sophistication. So he created this new identity, and then he wrapped it in, buying in very strategic areas. He didn't. He went to all these destination master plans that were stock full of amenities and had incredible lifestyle, like Verado, and would put that product there, and there was nothing that could compete with it, right? And that started to garner us market share, and it was just a lot of fun. Fred Herman was, an incredible president to work for. And so I was there for 7 years learning so much. And we were, we were the most aggressive acquiring builder. So again, this was another part of my life, another gift, right? So you take a guy like me who learned so much from Commerce Realty Advisors, and then he learned this structure at Richmond, right? And really learned how to do it right. And then you put him with an aggressive buying CEO with a specialized product to compete with what is ailing the market at the time. And they were the first ones out there. And Nathan, another one who's out there who's constantly like a great relationship, understanding what we wanted to do and how we were going to accomplish it, and really making it happen. So many of these dreams, like it's so hard. I have all these names in my head. It's like your life doesn't really become your life without all of these names of the people that are in and around you. And the older you get, especially for me now in this role, I feel like that next step is I have to be the Michael Martindale. I have to be the Steve Hilton. I have to be the David Madrids. I have to be the David Vischer. I have to be the Larry Feckenheier. I have to be the person that's there that can move that next person into.
Let me ask you something though. It's weird because you brought up like, was it Steve Hilton's dad's in the office, right? You're working. So go back. So your daughter's 17 probably, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's just starting high school, I think, when I'm.
Yeah. So when you came over to Richmond for the second time.
When I first came over, she was young, because think these are 7-year runs.
Yeah.
So like she is 17 right now. So she was like grade school when I first started it.
So like you said, like how much you admired that Steve had his dad there and stuff. And so how does this affecting you this? Because you're talking about how you're working 7 days a week, 14-hour days. You're missing the vacations with your family. Like home life, like work-life balance, you don't have that.
I don't.
So do you feel like you're missing out on some stuff?
I
feel like you are.
Yeah. I will tell you, like, it's tough, right? Because I think now, like I have a lot of hindsight 2020 now, but I will tell you, I married the right person. I don't know if I'm really capable. Like I have always been an extremist when it comes to working hard. So when I was an athlete, like I felt like I was the hardest worker in the room.
Right.
No one worked harder than me. And still to this day, like people don't, like I get up at 3:00 in the morning. That's my daily routine. So I get up at 3 before the sun's up.
Hold on, before let's. I'm gonna do this whole thing too because this is. But I want to get through this real quick.
You're right.
Here.
Like I will tell you, like it's probably my biggest regret. My wife, I married the right person because she communicates the really important moments that I have to make and that I can't make. And oftentimes in our business, we're working so much and being present and there. Like I'm in a field where half of the people are out there at 5:00 in the morning starting. So you want to be present out in the field, and then the other half are working till 9:00 at night at the end of the month to close out deals. You want to be there for the guys that are building the house early in the morning with the trades, and you want to be there with the closing department as they're closing out that final file at 11:00 at night at the end of the month. And so sometimes if you want to do the leadership thing the right way and be fully present, it doesn't offer a lot of home life. And
you got to be in the trenches with them. But
I know my family has suffered. I know that I have not been there at a lot of critical moments, and that has been the sacrifice. I don't think I would be where I am today without the sacrifice of land, because I think there is a trailing, he works this hard thing that is a value add. Now,
they're obviously proud of the fact. I mean, it's great to see how hard your kids seeing how hard you work. I mean, that's obviously a huge benefit. I'm sure there's also the moments of damn, I wish Dad was here as well.
They said last night, you'll laugh at this. There was a joke last night. My dad said all the kids on a soccer team call me the scout because I'm in a suit every time. This is the only time I didn't wear a suit today. I always have a tie on, so like the scout's here. And then my daughter was saying that they call me the agent at her soccer. So it's like, I think that a lot of them don't understand what it is that I do, but I'm always there like in a suit. And I've never missed a game. I'm really good at those things. I think that it's the at night at home studying with them stuff, and where my wife has really taken the brunt of it, right? Like she's had to be alone a lot. I've often worried, like as these years have gone by, like because I do feel bad, and I want them to feel like it was meaningful. And my intensity sometimes is a little too much. It's a little too much with sports with them. It could be a little too much with their grades. And like you said earlier, like like if I was really honest about what I was putting out back when I was their age, they are 10 times the kids that I ever dreamed of being.
Right.
Which I think is part of the pleasure of it. But I try not to I really try hard now, and I only do this through my wife because she can stop me the minute I start going down the wrong road. I try not to make my dreams their dreams. And I used to be bad at that. Like I would say with sports are so incredibly important to me, and I don't know why, but I feel like the lack of accomplishment I had in some areas, I wanted them to kind of tie that knot for me.
Yeah.
And it made it uncomfortable, right? Because I don't think they ever really liked some of those things. And if it wasn't for my wife to go, hey, like, you're missing the point. Mm-hmm. And we've been married 18 years, coming on 19 here, and she has always been very forceful with that. And so she saved me from myself many, many times. And I've often thought of, like, we're getting this point to where, my daughter is a junior. In 2 years, she's going to be out of the house. And in 3 years, my son's going to be out, right?
Yep.
Well, really, 1 year she's out. In 2 years, my son's out. He's a sophomore. And so I've often thought about how are my wife, because I can't leave my wife alone all that time. Like, the marriage will end after 20 years, so it's like, I want to think we have to do something to where her and I have that time together, and she feels like I'm putting a priority on her. But you're right. Steve Hilton did that, right? He prioritized his father and put him in there. I've done some things this year. I've made some small minor adjustments in how I do things. And I am a little obsessive compulsive. So sometimes I get I have that blue collar thing. Like, if I don't do this every day for the rest of my life, it's never going to happen. I've pulled away from some of those things, and there's still been, good results and good growth.
Everything's still good.
So I'm trying it, and that leads us into the next stage.
Well, I had before we get to that, I had a cool story with conversation with my son the other day, and he's at NAU now, but it's so weird. Is he really? I mean, he's in the dorm doing Zoom. It's like he could really be in Europe right now if he really wanted to, taking classes. But we were having a conversation about almost trauma a little bit about how rough I was when I was his coach.
You were brutal.
Yeah.
Like as a dad.
Yeah.
Sisters, no.
And but I was there for everything, right? I coached all their teams. My daughter's the same way. But I had a moment where my assistant coach one time said to me, I remember we were at a Cerritos tournament in California, and he goes, "Hey, there's more kids on the field than just Aiden." Because I was just because he had gotten to the point where he just was struggling a little bit, and we were on this unbelievable team, right? And he was the coach's son struggling, and it was and I was feeling the pressure, oh my gosh, and I just clicked it and said, you know what, I don't even want to do this anymore, and I turned from being the coach to the dad that just sat by himself in the corner after practices or games. Didn't matter what happened or what they did. We just went and got ice cream or went and got food, and I never talked about the games. But he told me, this is just the other day, we were hanging those cafe lights in the backyard, just him and I. This is Wednesday last week. He goes, me and my friends, the teammates, they used to sit around and have conversations about the abuse that they took from all the dads after the games. Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? He's like, oh, no. We would just sit around and we would be like, oh, my dad did this, and my dad did that, and my dad did this, and my dad's called me that. And I'm going, oh, my gosh.
Funny.
What? So
I think there's a long lineage of this that goes
on.
Oh,
my gosh.
From generation to generation, right?
And I know that it's a huge thing that they used to teach, especially when we were at CCV, where they used to talk all about it was meetings about how you're supposed to act. There's videos about how you're supposed to act when you get in the car after games.
Were your parents like that?
Dude, I don't even remember. I mean,
we talk about
my
this
mom
all the
didn't.
Time. We had, even though we were 2.5 years apart, we had very different
parenting.
Ryan will say, I don't even feel like your dad or our dad was our dad. You had a totally different experience because they were very hardcore on me. Incredibly hard.
My mom wasn't at all on me, but my mom did everything for me. I remember my dad being very difficult. I mean, literally pulling me from games right to the garage to lift weights because I was so skinny. like your son. Like it was like almost like he was embarrassed of my size. Right. There was those
Isn't
moments
funny?
of like, just like, I
So, like,
remember
all
the
perspective.
abuse
Yeah.
of like, but yet I was doing, and I was going, wait. Like, so I flipped and became a totally like opposite.
And you were able to manage it without pouting. Do you pout?
Not at all. I don't,
my
you know what
wife
I do?
says it.
I don't care. I don't even care because my son doesn't play soccer anymore. My daughter's a sophomore now. And like, I've just had fun with her.
Yeah.
And she had her, 7, 8-year-old where dad was a coach too, where it was kind of I was a little bit of a douchebag to her. And that it all ended at the same time.
Yeah.
And so she's had a pretty awesome experience because we get into to the game. I mean, she plays at RSL now.
Yeah.
And
It's a great
we get
club.
in the car with her and her teammates and stuff. And it's like more of like, who they're like, we're going to Dutch, right? And they could have lost 6-0. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and my joke always is like, did you guys win?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we lost again, Dad. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. And if they win, I'm like, oh, you guys lost today?
It's like we're
Because I just
twinning,
want to
yeah.
pretend like I don't care. I really don't care. I want
It's
them to go
good
to
you
practice.
caught it though. Like some
Yeah.
people never catch it, right? And
Oh, my
that-
son told me, he's like, that was one of the best things you've ever done was stop doing what you were doing because it was like, it's
don't
like
think-
he's got PTSD from this shit.
and I'm still there. I don't think I've graduated to fully out of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Like it really bothers me that I'm that dad, but
Yeah.
I'm like quiet on the sideline. I don't do anything like that. But to me, it's like the work, but like it's the preparation for the opportunity to excel. And so I see zero preparation. And then where I don't do well is like, they're like, oh, I'm so frustrated. I don't think I like soccer. Well, why not? Well, I'm not playing. Well, you got to like practice to play. You got to there has to be a sacrifice. Like I think what a lot of kids don't understand in this era is there is a loss. Like you have to lose something to gain something. You have to.
There's the private training sessions that we both do with our kids.
Like there's a sacrifice, right? And
Right,
I
they
think
miss out
often,
on stuff.
I think oftentimes I worry about some of the generation, not all of them, but I worry that are they sacrificing enough to accomplish their dream? And I think the hardest part in life is I think a lot of people would sacrifice. They just don't know what their dream is, right? And sometimes they don't know what are the measurables that I need to be doing on a daily basis to when that opportunity shows up that I'm actually ready for it and shine in that moment. And there's a lot of uncomfortable, like I think back to my childhood, like my kids are way better athletes than I was. Like they really are. Like at the ages that they are, like they're way better than I was. But I was more intense. Like
I think that is the biggest differentiator because I remember like being in our driveway for hours, just playing, shooting
basketball.
baskets.
Yes, yeah.
And doing like my cheer routines in front of my mirror for like hours. And I think because my kids are a little bit older, having one incredibly intense child and the other two who were talented but didn't have that hunger.
Yeah, it's not there.
The youngest one, that's where her self-esteem came from. So that was her biggest motivator. And I think she has seen a shift like you did.
Yeah.
When you were done with college, well, her shift happened going from high school to college because she was no longer that stellar athlete because she decided, you know what, I'm not going to go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough to swim D1.
Yeah.
There's
a
I
morning,
think I just
right?
want to go to school and be a student and not get up and have practices twice a day
And
and
is that
swim
okay?
for 4 hours and then do dry land training. And it was hard as a parent to accept that because we all just assumed she was going to go.
Isn't it? Don't you find it interesting, Trish? Like, I think there's so many people that think they're just incredible parents. And like, I do, like we talk about, like I do have this imposter syndrome. Like I constantly feel like I'm going to be found out for I'm not as good as a leader. I'm not as good as an operator. I'm not as good as a father. And I have some characteristics in parenting that aren't qualities that if I was looking at somebody else from the outside looking in, I would not like. I think my intensity is too much for them at times. And I think my job should be to make it fun so that they want to work harder at something. And oftentimes I'm like, I'm so structured, and I think it does come from being in business. It's like, hey, like I literally have dry erase boards. I'm like I'll write on there like you have to juggle for 30 minutes. You have to do evolution of touch, which is like this footwork thing, and you have to shoot so many balls, and you have to stay on track on a daily basis. But what happens is like you realize you miss life, right? You're not talking about all the fun things, and I'm in the middle of your transition right now. I'm in the middle of it. And I think sometimes they don't believe that it's happening. Like they make fun of me. Like I'll be like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And then my son will be like, my son, instead of calling me Bubba, because he calls me Boob. So he'll be like, I know you care, Boob. So now his sense of humor is like really like where he's like torturing me now with it. But I'm realizing that like sometimes the intensity of it, and it can come from a parent or it can come from how high of a level that they're in, because some of the levels are just naturally intense, right? The coaches are intense. Yeah. I coached them for years too, and it was fun when I coached. I wasn't bad when I was coaching. It was when
because he was a star.
Yeah, well, when they were on teams that were, it started to matter a little bit more, and then there was like you wanted them to get to that next step. I found myself like pushing too hard to get to that next step, and when they weren't ready.
Let me just say this. This is what he said to me that like made me flip immediately.
Yeah.
He said we were in Tucson. Okay, and he was still on that same team that was like the best team the state had been forever.
Yeah.
And he had been like relegated from being a starter for his whole life to a kid that was kind of coming off the bench and not even really getting that much play time. And he wasn't really, he had gone through a growth spurt, and his hips had like literally stopped like functioning correctly.
Yeah.
So like he couldn't. It looked like he was pulling a trailer trying to run.
That couldn't run.
And he was just like devastated. And we made a decision like on the way home. He's like, Dad, here's the deal. He's a sophomore in high school. He goes, I've been going to practice at least 3 days a week since I was 5 years old.
Yeah. I
have sometimes, and when you're playing that level, he's like, I have at least 2 games on the weekend, sometimes 5. I'm out of town at least once a month at a tournament. My only real friends that I play with are my friends from my soccer team. Yeah. I don't really have a friend group at school because my life revolves around my social life, soccer. And I don't really have a life, and I do all this stuff, and I don't even really like it.
Yeah.
He goes, so should I be doing this?
Yeah.
Spending this much time doing something that I don't really love anymore. And it's affecting like how everything else goes in my life. And I would like to like have a life again. Yeah. But my thought is also, okay, cool. There was a lot of great memories and times during all that stuff as well. But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because are you going to just be lazy and play video games all the time? Like, what are you going to do? Because you got to stay in shape. This is a part of like staying active.
We parent the same. If you're not about soccer excellence, you're probably doing heroin.
Well, it's like seriously, like you have to stay active because, like she was saying before, I just would go outside and I would do all those drills on my own. Then I would shoot basketball. Then I'd ride my skateboard. Then I get on my dirt bike and then my bike. It's like I have to pay somebody to train my kid to go do something.
You're so funny. Like, how timely is this podcast? Like, I am there now. Like, I'm right in the middle of it. And if my wife were to watch this, she would be like, "No, you're not." Like, you're still,
right.
You're still the screamer on the sideline. So it's, I think it's so important. You know what's crazy though? Like when I think back to when I was their age, I never had that conversation, and I don't know if my parents and I were even having these intellectual conversations about what we enjoyed and what we didn't enjoy. It's kind of just what we did.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was telling, like I told you when I was teasing him last night about, I asked Perfect Toby, my daughter's boyfriend, I was like, where were you? And he was like, oh, I just got done with practice. And then after practice, I went and did this, I went to my job and did some job thing. And now he was going to dinner with us at 8:00 at night, which is pretty late, right? And I was like, yeah, that's what I did. I got straight A's and I did things right. And everybody laughed really hard. But, I think sometimes too is one of the things I've learned is when it is the right thing, you'll be telling them that, hey, you should have more balance in your life, right? Because they're going to be so into it. And I think part of the thing is sports sometimes can be that thing we give to our kids until they find that thing. And I'm realizing now, like in this moment with you, that that's probably not the thing my kids want, right? And for a lot of the same reasons, I think with COVID, I'm so worried about my son as a sophomore in high school. Like they're not having those interpersonal relationships. They're not with these other kids. They're not out connecting with each other. They're at home with their parents, which is probably the last place they should be, right? So it's interesting, but at the same time, this last year, getting online a little bit more, I've learned so much. There's been like so much growth in my life because there's been so many outlets to questions I needed answers for that were kind of out there that I probably would have never have gone to look for it there if there wasn't.
Real Talk is brought to you by Tsunami. We all know that we should be doing more videos than we are doing. And one of the hesitations for myself is that I don't feel like I do a very good job filming them. I get nervous about the way they're going to look. And I am pretty sure that most people feel the same way as I do. So Tsunami is a product that will allow you to film your own videos. And you can send those videos via the app that you can download it on the App Store. And they will make the video look professional because it is done by a professional editing team. So you want a header, you want a footer, you want to just look better in general. And for the cost, it's unbelievably inexpensive. So if you're looking for video help, this is the best way to go about doing it, especially if you want to film videos on your phone like we all should. So it's Tsunami with an X, and that's it.